Have you ever told someone that you are busy but they kept calling you anyway? Or you said that you didn't want to talk about something but they kept asking questions? Maybe you asked someone to stop making a certain joke but they kept doing it. These situations are all about boundaries and why people sometimes keep crossing them. So, in simple terms, boundaries are limits that we set to protect our time, energy, and comfort. They tell others what we are okay with and what we are not okay with. Examples of boundaries include saying no when you're tired and not wanting to discuss personal topics, asking for personal space, protecting your time from interruptions. Boundaries actually help relationships stay healthy. So imagine this situation, right? This is actually a very common situation. You tell a friend, you know what, I can't talk tonight, I need some rest. But they keep texting and calling anyway. That is a boundary being crossed. But the reason it happens is not always the same. Sometimes people cross boundaries simply because they don't realize one exists. For example, a co-worker asks you personal questions like, "Hey, why are you still single?" To them it might feel like casual conversation, but to you it feels uncomfortable. They didn't necessarily intend harm, but they didn't recognize the boundary. But that doesn't mean that it should be crossed. Sometimes people think a boundary is flexible or temporary. For example, you tell a friend, "You know what, I don't actually want to drink tonight." And they respond with, "Come on, it's just one drink, right? Please." They assume that you might change your mind, so they keep pushing. See, from their perspective, it seems like it's innocent persuasion or harmless persuasion. But from your perspective, it would feel like they are pressuring you to do it. And then, when people are used to having access to your time or attention, they may struggle when a boundary appears. For example, a friend used to call you every night, and now you say, "You know what, I need some quiet time to focus on myself." They might still call out of habit. They are not always trying to disrespect you, but sometimes they are adjusting to a new limit. But that doesn't mean that you should adjust to keep them happy. And then sometimes people cross boundaries because they're focused on what they want. For example, a co-worker asks you to stay late to help with their work. You say you need to go home, but instead they keep insisting because it would make their life easier. In this case, their need is actually taking priority over your limits. In some cases, people test boundaries to see how firm they are. For example, you tell someone, "Please don't make jokes about that topic," but they keep making the same joke again and again later. They might be testing whether the boundary is serious or it's negotiable, and whether they can keep crossing it without consequence. You see, setting boundaries can actually feel uncomfortable because we often worry about hurting someone's feelings, seeming rude, or creating conflict. But boundaries are not about controlling others. They are actually about protecting your own well-being. A healthy boundary is clear, calm, and consistent. For example, you can say, "I can't help with that tonight. I actually need some time to rest." You're not actually attacking the other person. You're simply just explaining your limits. When someone crosses a boundary, it doesn't always mean that they are a bad person. Sometimes they just don't understand. Sometimes they're used to a different dynamic. Sometimes they're just focused on their own needs. But that doesn't mean that the boundary should disappear or you should never set boundaries. So, boundaries are the limits that protect our comfort, energy, and time. People may cross them for many different reasons. That is, they don't recognize the boundary, they think that it's flexible, they're used to their old patterns, they prioritize their own selfish needs, or they just test limits. Actually, understanding these reasons helps us respond more calmly and clearly when boundaries are crossed. So let me know in the comments about situations where you guys felt like your boundaries were crossed anytime. And remember this, boundaries are not actually bad. They actually help keep relationships more healthy. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.